Hogfather feels like the perfect book to read and rebind going into Christmas. I found myself looking forward to the whimsy of Terry Pratchett, as I felt I've been in a bit of a reading rut recently. I haven't enjoyed the last couple of books as much as I'd hoped, and I feel like I need the escape of Discworld. I've never read any Pratchett, but the Sky TV adaptations came out at the perfect time for me as a kid, and I catch that warm, nostalgic feeling whenever I see them airing in the holiday season. I knew I'd enjoy Hogfather, as the book that started me on my reading journey earlier this year was the cozy fantasy Legends and Lattes. Its author, Travis Baldry, is often credited with putting the cozy genre on the map, but whenever I see interviewers bring this up to him, he deflects and points to examples like Pratchett's Discworld as the true genesis. So, how does Hogfather compare to the book that got me back into reading? It's certainly got all the charm and whimsy I found in the TV adaptations, and more. Terry is wonderful at painting vivid scenes with just the right amount of humour and ridiculousness to distract you from the deep topics he explores. He's a master of his craft, nailing the balance of prose and dialogue to breathe so much detail into scenes without it ever feeling like you get bogged down. It was certainly a breath of fresh air after having just fought through the dense prose of Wicked. If I were to point out one criticism, it would be that there aren't any chapters. I kind of get it from a technical point of view. Terry masterfully switches between viewpoints to spin his web of plot lines, and this often happens so frequently that changing chapters every time would make them feel exceptionally short. However, on multiple occasions, I found myself having to reread a sentence that didn't make sense, only to realise the narrative had jumped to a different character's perspective, which could feel a little jarring. I think chapters are best used as dividers to signal an important scene change. They are a useful tool to make the reader's experience that little bit smoother, and for my ADHD brain, it's also just nice for me to have that little dopamine hit of accomplishment whenever I finish a chapter. Not having them did pull me out of immersion quite frequently, and it was harder to gauge my progress or set myself challenges like reading X number of chapters before bed. That said, it was nowhere near as challenging as the incoherent structure I found with Wicked, and Pratchett's writing was engaging all the way through, so I can't dock it many points at all. I completely understand why Discworld has accumulated the wide fan base it has, and why it consistently ranks highly in polls like r/Fantasy's yearly top novels list. I really believe his universe will be viewed as one of the classics of our age. I'll give Hogfather 4.5 out of 5 stars. Reading this gave me that brilliant double-edged feeling of discovering a rich new world, an excitement at the depth waiting for me, paired with a daunting awe at its sheer scale. I look forward to exploring more of Discworld. I'm not convinced it fits exactly into the cozy genre. There are so many viewpoints and plot lines to keep tabs on that it feels like a much more active reading experience. It definitely helps keep you engaged, but I find it lacks the smooth, flowing narratives that I enjoy so much in cozy fantasy. So, what thoughts did Hogfather leave me with? At first, the themes were so perfectly wrapped in Pratchett's humour that they were absorbed almost invisibly. It actually took me a little while to reflect on what the book had taught me, but then I realised it made me excited for Christmas. It felt like the antidote to the very thing that has made me feel a little ambivalent towards the holidays in recent years. I'm a deconstructed Christian. I grew up in the church, and as an adult, I consciously stepped away from religion. In doing so, I also stepped away from some of the magic that had made celebrations like Christmas feel so special to me. I think Pratchett, who walked a similar path from a religious home to atheism, might have been working through a similar feeling in Hogfather. It feels similar to that adult knowledge of knowing Santa isn't real, mixed with the desire to preserve the space for faith and wonder for people you love who still want to believe. Pratchett's Hogfather isn't a parody of Christmas for us to escape to when we need a distraction or some festive cheer. Buried in the comedy there's an anthropological and philosophical defense for why we need the holiday at all. The book's climax, where Death explains the necessity of the little lies, was a revelation. Pratchett argues that the lie of the Hogfather isn't a childish thing to be outgrown, but an essential building block we use to construct our humanity. Justice, mercy, duty, that kind of thing, they don't occur naturally in our universe. They are concepts we've conjured into existence through telling ourselves stories that reinforce their necessity in our societies. Christmas is one of those stories, and Terry's book helped me to regain some of its magic by framing Christmas not as the single story I learned in Sunday school, but as just one interpretation of the countless stories humans have dreamt up in the cold winters to make sense of our darkest nights. The Yule log, the Feast of Saturnalia, the rebirth of the sun. The Hogfather, with his tusks and raw ancient belief, feels like a tribute to all the older, wilder solstice stories that we've always felt we needed to keep the dark at bay. This historic human ritual being celebrated in this book is magical. We practice generosity by leaving pork pies and sherry out for a mythical being to learn how to be generous to real people. We rehearse hope by lighting lights in the darkest days as an intentional rebellion against despair. Stripped of religion, the holiday becomes about our core human desire for connection, feasting and telling ourselves a better story as the world turns towards the light. It's the reset button we all agree to press, not because a god demands it, but because we are fragile, story-loving creatures who need this shared celebration of warmth to make it through the winter with the knowledge that a new spring is coming. Hogfather didn't give me back my childhood beliefs. Instead, it offered me something sturdier, the understanding that the ritual itself, the shared act of a belief in a better future, is where the real magic has always been. This appreciation is something that will shape me for many Christmases to come. This rebind has been one of my most satisfying. Like with my hand-bound Frankenstein copy, I had a clear, core idea to pursue, inspired by one of the posters for the Hogfather TV adaptation that I remember so fondly. I wanted the cover to feel like the Hogfather's fur-lined cloak, with the figure of Death appearing from the hood. Now, I'd sworn off heat transfer vinyl after the disaster with my Wicked rebind, but the moment I settled on this cloak idea, I knew I needed a soft red velvet to sell the cozy, Christmassy feel. And to get those essential shiny silver and gold titles on that fabric, HTV was the best way. So I gritted my teeth and pulled out the Cricut again. To my surprise, it all went smoothly. The only issue being a dull blade, which was easily swapped out. It wasn't just the vinyl that behaved. Almost every step went smoothly. The 3D print was perfect. The painting felt easier than my past attempts. I tried a new-to-me technique of using acrylic medium to turn the velvet into book cloth, something I felt was necessary as I was worried that backing it with paper could cause issues when bending it around the complex curves on the front cover. It worked so well and was so easy that I think it'll be my go-to method going forward. I was concerned about the fur I ordered for the hem of the hood, as it was way too long, but I whipped out my hair clippers, a tool I never thought I would use in bookbinding, and that worked beautifully. The only part I struggled with was a little feature I've put in this book that I've obscured from view until now. The observant among you may have noticed a little cutout on the inside of the front cover. This was for an ambitious detail I've wanted to try for a while, adding electronics to a book cover. Hogfather felt like a great opportunity for a first trial. One of the things I remember so vividly from the TV adaptation is the pinpoint blue LEDs they used for Death's eyes. I don't think that's entirely accurate to the book. They are described a little more orb-like, so I used a little bit of blue paint to sell that effect, and to show up even when the LEDs aren't on. I did struggle a bit with the wiring. The LEDs I got were so small, and had such thin wires that it was difficult to strip them without causing damage. I also struggled connecting them to the little button cell battery holder, At first, I tried to use solder-filled heat shrink to save time. I thought it had worked, because both lights lit up when I tested it. But then, after stuffing all the wires into the recess, one of the LEDs stopped working, so I had to rip it out and start over. I decided to do things properly this time, and got my soldering iron out, which worked, but I didn't have any heat shrink small enough, so I used Kapton tape instead. It's only 3 volts, so it's perfectly safe, even if it isn't the prettiest under the hood. Everything worked perfectly the second time, and stuffing the wires into the recessed channel I made for them went much more neatly than my first attempt. I had to be careful when trimming the various layers away from the battery holder, but thankfully I didn't cut any of the thin wires. This brings us back to having just cased in the book. Everything looked great when I pulled it out of the press. I just had to use my magic glue eraser to remove any of those little spots of glue that seemed to accumulate out of nowhere. The end papers separated well and didn't have any wrinkles. Unfortunately, the little strip of fur that I thought I'd tucked into the inside of the cover before casing in the text block had appeared to have escaped. But this wasn't the end of the world. I needed to create a little card liner for the inside of the cover anyway, as I had to make a flap to cover the battery holder, and it was easy enough to tuck the fur back into place underneath the card before pressing the book one last time before we get to the reveal. If you like how this turned out, please give the video a like and consider subscribing. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Have a Merry Christmas. See you next time.